Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'in. We start today on hadith number 63. عن أنس رضي الله تعالى عنه عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال يسروا ولا تعسروا بشروا ولا تنفروا. This hadith translates as bring ease and don't make things difficult. Give glad tidings and don't discourage people. Don't be a source of discouragement. Now, in my mind, there are about 5 or so hadith that I think are foundational to a Muslim's lifestyle. I mean, these are hadith that are applicable in every single day of your life. This is one of them. Right? This is one of them. Another one is المؤمن القوي خير وأحب إلى الله من المؤمن الضعيف وفي كل خير احرص على ما ينفعك. This hadith, a believer who's stronger in their iman is more beloved to Allah than a believer who's weaker in their iman, but there's good in all. And then the Prophet continues saying, pursue that which is good for you. And then a list goes on, among others. So this is a very important hadith in terms of our own day-to-day affairs. And it's pretty straightforward. Bring ease. What does that mean? You know, there are people who are just difficult. Whatever it is, they overthink things, their personality is complicated, they're grumpy people, so they like making other people grumpy. There's people who make things more difficult than they need to be. The Prophet ﷺ says, don't be like that. Rather, bring ease. And let's just be clear here. This doesn't mean be easy for other people to take advantage of you. That's not one of the characteristics of a believer, as other hadith indicate. But there are certain things that we need to look at and say, no, this isn't important enough for me to make it complicated. Right? So be a source of ease, easygoing. Right? The kids want this. Is there anything haram about it? No. Is there anything unreasonable about it? No. Okay, yassiru. Make it easy. Right? But what about rules in the house? Some parents have rules so strict the kids can't wait to leave. Right? They can't wait to leave. And you know, if the parent who's very strict is out, everybody's happy. But when they come home, he's home, she's home, whoever it is. This isn't an environment that, you know, we want for our families or for ourselves in our interactions. Simplify things, right? Don't overthink things. There will always be an element of tawakkul in your life. There has to be. Right? Should I take this job or that job? The more you think about it, the more things you'll need to consider. Right? So it's just like marriage. Personally, this is my personal preference and opinion. I don't think it's healthy to have longer engagement periods. Now, sometimes there are certain circumstances that require a long, that's fine, I'm not talking about that. But people who say, let's make the engagement period long so that we get to know each other, right? Just to make sure, right? And then, of course, in that year or so, you're going to see things about the other person that's not ideal. Well, obviously, it's a human being. They're a human being. A marriage isn't successful because both are perfect angels. Marriage is successful because they learn how to accept that the other person is not exactly like you. They learn to accept the imperfections of the other person. They learn to tolerate the imperfections of the other person. That's what makes a marriage successful, right? And so, yeah, let's make sure it's long so that we're 100% sure. Well, that's a recipe for disaster. In that year, you will see the uglier side of that person. And if you're not married, then it's easy to say, you know what, this isn't for me. But if you are married, it's like, okay, well, I have to deal with this. Good. That's what we want. Deal with it. Right? Make things easy. And on the topic of marriage, right, sometimes parents, actually quite often parents make it extremely difficult for their kids to get married. She has to be from this ethnicity. She has to be that. He can't be this. He has to be a doctor. He has that. We're not living in those days anymore. Those days are gone. The way marriage worked when you were, young individuals is not the same today. Your kids could care less about whether their spouse is Arab, Desi, Afghan, Asian, white, African, wallahi, they could care less. It's not a big deal to them. Sure, maybe one of your kids, you know what, I prefer. Your kids could care less about the background of their spouse. Now, of course, there are certain things that you want to be adamant about. They're a decent human being. They have good religiosity. Islam isn't just nothing to them. And this is what the Prophet says. Find someone who's good in their akhlaq and good in their religiosity. Now, let's be clear here. What's good needs to be equivalent to the religiosity of your child. If your child is barely praying 5 times a day, don't go look for somebody who's praying tahajjud every single day. That's not relevant, right? And although you want the best for your child, you also need to understand the realities. Somebody who prays tahajjud every single day and is extremely practicing will not see eye to eye with somebody who's learning, right? Nor is it fair for them, for either of them. But when you have somebody who's of the same level, inshallah, they'll grow together, right? They'll build together. So make marriage easy. Same thing when it comes to dowry requests, wedding expectations, right? A wedding can cost millions or it can cost a few thousand. I've seen beautiful weddings that cost a few $1,000s. They rented a space in a masjid, right? They brought people to cook on site, delicious food, nothing fancy. Everybody is happy. Husband and wife are happy. They loved it, right? Life goes on. Now, if you have millions to spend, by all means. But if your children are trying to get married, don't make it more difficult than it already is. It's difficult enough for them to find a suitable spouse. And then to add all those layers to make it increasingly difficult, right? So make things simple and don't make things more difficult than they need to be. This is the mindset of the believer. And know that when you bring ease to other people, Allah will bring ease to your life. When you treat people as easygoing, when you're easygoing with people, Allah will be easy with you. Perhaps Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will overlook our sins because we were easy with other people. In fact, there's a story of the Prophet ﷺ tells us a story of a man who did not do any good in his life. No salah, no zakah, no charity, nothing. And he was a very successful business person. But he would do one thing. He would tell his servants, his employees, if somebody owes me money and time comes for it to be paid, it's due, and they don't have it, give them more time. Don't hassle them. Don't harass them. If they need more time, give them more time. No questions asked. Kind of like a Costco deal, right? You go anytime, return. This is what he did. And the Prophet says Allah will forgive his sins because he used to overlook other people's, he used to consider other people's realities and give them more time. In fact, sometimes he would even just say, don't worry about the loan. I forgive you for the loan, right? So bring ease, be easygoing, make things easy for people, don't make things difficult. Bashiru wa la tunaffiru. The words that you say, are they words of encouragement? Words that are uplifting? Words that strengthen the other person? Or are they demoralizing? They put them down, right? They ruin their emotions. This is very important. With all that's going on in the protests and whatnot, whenever the situation is going on, I try and find a surah, a set of verses that I think is similar. A moment in the time of the companions that I feel is similar. And what's similar to what's going on is the Surah Al-Ahzab, the situation of the trench. Now, of course, there's big differences in terms of, there's not like an army versus an army or anything like that, but you see a group of people who are barricading themselves, who are being sieged from around, and people are trying to stop them, and all the harassment and all this. You could see the parallels here. So I'm looking through the surah this morning, trying to reflect, learn the lesson, see what's going on. How is Allah guiding the companions through this situation? Right? And what I noticed in the surah is that what Allah focuses on is what the believers were saying and what the sellout hypocrites were saying. Not what they were doing, what they were saying. Because when you are in this moment, there's no physical fighting, It's more of a game of patience. Who's going to outpatient the other one, right? Now it's an issue of morale. Who has more will? Who has more resolve? Who has more resilience? The believers were saying things. This is the promise of Allah. Allah and His Messenger spoke the truth. We believe in Allah. Like they're encouraging each other. Whereas the hypocrites, it's all about, we have to leave Medina, Yathrib. They didn't even call it Medina, they call it Yathrib. We have to leave this place. They're coming after us. There's no way we can deal with this. Well, I want to go back home. I have to protect my family. Very discouraging things, right? So words, I'm reflecting, and like words are incredibly powerful. Incredibly powerful. There's this, you should check it out. There's this, what's it called? There's this speech group, public speaking group, that's international. What are it called? Postmasters. Yeah? Yeah, Toastmasters. Right, Toastmasters, yes, that's it. And they have international competitions. And there's one Arab guy, his name is Muhammad Qahtani. He won one of the years. And his speech is brilliant. Right? He starts off, he says, hello, he greets, he does the formal beginning, and he takes a cigarette out, right? And he takes a lighter out and he wants to smoke. Of course, the reaction of the audience is what? Like, what are you doing? This is not the place for it. So he looks at them and is like, what? What's wrong? What am I doing? It's like, oh, you think smoking is bad? Well, let me tell you some things. More people die of diabetes every year than smoking. Yet nobody will find it bizarre if I take a Snicker bar and eat it. And he gives statistics. And the audience calms down. Oh my God, I never thought of it that way. And then he says, yeah, but everything I just said was made up. And you all believed it. It's hilarious, right, when he says it. He says the power of words. If you say something the right way, you can convince people. Of course, if you say things the wrong way, you can say the right things the wrong way, you will deter people. How about people who say the wrong things in the wrong way for the wrong reasons? Bashiru wa la tunaffiru. Right? Those people, this is wrong with the masjid, and this person's on the board, and then all it is criticism and complaints and how everything is wrong. This is what the Prophet is saying not to do. Wa la tunaffiru. Rather, bashiru. Hey, you all did a great job. You all did this. You all did that. And here are some ways you can improve next year. You could say it, right? You could say it in a way where you all did this wrong and you did this wrong, and because of that, or you could say you could get the same exact point across in a way that will actually influence the others to listen to you and to do it. Bashiru wa la tunaffiru, right? And in parenting, the same thing. Do we encourage our kids? Right? How do we encourage our kids? How do we build that in them? Yesterday when I was at the protest, there's a group of youth who are organizing this. They're not experienced, they have limited experience. They haven't been in the trenches. These are people who are living in alhamdulillah, comfortable lives. Right? And some people want to come in and say, no, you should do this, no, you should do that. People who have 40, 50 years of experience in this realm. And then tension builds. Right? Now here it's not an issue of who's right, who's wrong. It's an issue of this is something they organized. You need to encourage them to take the lead. Even if you know what they're doing is not the best way to do it. So long as it's not illegal or anything like that, let's be clear here. You might think that strategically it's better to do this than that. That's okay, they disagree. My role as somebody who has more experience than them is to encourage their leadership. If there are, things that are really, if they do it, it will be a big mistake. No, I should say something. But the smaller mistakes, let them trip and help them get back up. Right? I'm going to be there to support them, to encourage them. And when they make these small mistakes, then I'm going to help them repair it so that they learn. Right? So the Prophet is saying, Bashiru wa la tunaffiru. Now, there's a context to this hadith. The Prophet ﷺ said this to Ali radiallahu ta'ala an, and Mu'adh ibn Jabal radiallahu ta'ala an, when he sent them to Yemen to give da'wah. He said, you're going to a people who are predominantly Jew and Christian. This is the way you do it. Call them to La ilaha illallah. If they accept, then teach them about salah. When they start praying, teach them about zakah. When they start giving zakah, teach them, gradually. And he tells them, Yassiru wa la tu'assiru, Bashiru wa la tunaffiru. Bring ease to them. Let them see that the religion brings ease to their life. It doesn't complicate their life. Let them see that following the religion will make their lives more tolerable, more easy to navigate. It's not going to make it more difficult. Right? Give them glad tidings of what they are doing. Encourage them to do it. Not, if you don't do it, you're going to hellfire. And if you don't do it, then this is going to happen. And if you don't do this, then this is going to happen. The rhetoric that we're so used to. Right? But alhamdulillah, that is changing. So this hadith is a very important one. So memorize it. Even if it's you memorize it in English, memorize it. Remember, this is a way of the way of the believer. Right. Bab man yuridillahu bihi khayran yufaqihu fid din. The chapter that if Allah wants good for someone, He will help them understand the religion. Very well-known hadith. And Muawiyah رضي الله تعالى عنه قال سمعت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يقول من يرد الله به خيرا يفقهه في الدين وإنما أنا قاسم والله عز وجل يعطي ولن تزال هذه الأمة قائمة على أمر الله لا يضرهم من خالفهم حتى يأتي أمر الله. He says here, Muawiyah رضي الله تعالى عنه says that the Prophet said, whoever Allah wants good for, He will give them understanding of the religion. All right. We are in the unit of knowledge. And one of the primary points that Bukhari rahimahullah ta'ala wants us to take away when it comes to understanding knowledge in Islam is its importance. How important is knowledge to a Muslim? And the answer is, it is so important that we see good from Allah as heavily tied to my understanding of the religion. That if Allah wants good for me, one of the ways He rewards me or gives me is by increasing my knowledge. What are the way Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala rewards sadaqah? When Allah in the Quran and Sunnah says, if you give sadaqah, Allah will give it back to you. It's not always about money. He's not always going to give you money back. But one of the ways He can give you back is by increasing your understanding of the religion. Right? So this is absolutely tremendous. Now you might be sitting there thinking, well, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't seem like He wants good for me because He didn't really put me on that path. Or the amount of time I spend learning the religion is not really that much. Or you might think, well, I really don't understand a lot about the religion. My knowledge is limited. That means Allah doesn't really want that much good for me. And the response to that is the following. If Allah wants good for someone, He gives them understanding of the religion, well, can I choose to pursue understanding of the religion? Do I have the choice to do that? Is there anything stopping me from doing it? Do I not have access to it? Okay, well, if that's a sign of good, then let me go ahead and take the initiative. Let me go find the knowledge. Let me go pursue the knowledge and understanding. And then inshallah, Allah will give me the good. Right? So the idea here is, it is in the mind of the believer. Of course, everybody wants good for themselves. This is human nature. There's no human being walking this earth that doesn't want good for themselves. It's just a matter of, do they know how to get that good? Do they know what the good is? Or are they just too lazy? Right? So everybody wants good for themselves. The Prophet ﷺ is teaching us, then go learn the religion. And you'll get good for yourself. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give you good. And the Prophet then says, إِنَّمَا أَنَا قَاسِمٌ. I am a distributor. I distribute. Allah is the one who gives. Right? So whether you tie this back to knowledge or to other things, we look to the Prophet ﷺ as a role model. Right? We want things from him. We want to drink from his fountain of wisdom, his fountain of knowledge, for his fountain of hawd, right? Of course. And the Prophet ﷺ saying, look, understand my role. My role is, I'm a kind of a middle person here. When Allah wants to give you, it just so happens He gives you through me. So we learn the Quran from who? The Prophet. We learn the Sunnah from who? The Prophet ﷺ. The correct way of understanding the Quran is the way the Prophet ﷺ understood the Quran and applied it. And his statements, hadith, is meant to give us more clarification and insight about the Quran itself. But it's Allah who's giving us. And the Prophet ﷺ just playing the role of a distributor. He gives it all to the Prophet ﷺ, and then the Prophet distributes it to us. So here it's teaching us to put our heart with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? That if I want something, then I need to get it from the source. That source is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And even though the way the world works is that if you want something, you get it through means, from someone, getting help from someone, through institutions, whatever it is, the believer always remembers that it is Allah who set all of this up, gave tawfiq to certain people to build these institutions, gave knowledge to certain people to learn from. Right? And so it all goes back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then the Prophet ﷺ says, there will always be, and it's very relevant to today, there will always be a group from my ummah who are on the truth, who are doing what pleases Allah. There will always be this. In other words, this ummah will never die until the Day of Judgment. Never. So long as La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah is on the earth, this ummah will have people who are on the truth. There's no such thing as a dead ummah of Islam. Right? And so this is very inspiring. What makes it even more inspiring is that then the Prophet ﷺ said, they won't be harmed by those who go against them. In other words, those who are on the truth, they're pursuing a cause. There's a goal they're trying to reach. And although some of them might be hurt, some of them might be killed, some of them might be arrested, whatever it is, the goal will be reached. And whoever abandons them will not affect their ability to reach the goal. You know, there was somebody who's in UCLA, in the encampments. And every now and then, you know, the counter-protesters, these very aggressive, violent people, are trying to spread rumors. We're coming after you. We're bringing hate groups who are armed and ready to go. Right? And then these heroes in these camps, you know, they're trying to get more people, bring more people, bring more people. And sometimes they feel disheartened that not as many people came as they need or as they want. Right? But this hadith is talking to them, saying, whoever comes, it's in their best interest. And whoever doesn't come, it's not going to harm you. It's not going to harm you. No. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, victory is from Him. We know this. Right? And you know, one of the lessons in Surah Al-Ahzab is that while the believers are doing their work, there are other armies of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doing their work. Right? For the Ahzab, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent the army of wind. He sent wind upon them. Every time they try and make a campfire, the wind would blow it out. And it was colder, it was in the winter. So they couldn't sustain this. They can't cook their food, it's too cold, they couldn't sustain it. Right? Also, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put fear in their hearts. وَقَذَفَ فِي قُلُوبِهِمُ الرُّعْبِ. Allah put fear in their hearts to keep them at bay. Or else if you just look at the numbers, 10,000 to what? They're heavily outnumbered, and the Muslims are sandwiched from the south and from the north. Like just from pure, basic military strategy, they didn't stand a chance. And then you ask the question, all they needed to do is just jump the trench, get around the trench, and that's it. The Muslims are over. But they couldn't. Why? Because Allah put fear in their hearts. Right? And so when you go to these protests, you'll see the campsite, just a bunch of people. That's not only what's happening. Wallahi, I'm seeing this. I'm not I'm not imagining. No, I know what's going on behind the scenes of individuals talking to this person, that person, stand down, don't do this, etc. Last night, yesterday morning, at the UCI, the Irvine Police was there, the Sheriff's Department was there, the UCI Police Department was there, and 2 other police departments. 5. They had 2 prison buses. 2. Both in a few hours, the police presence shrunk a lot, the prison buses went away. Well, you think that's random? Because there are people behind the scenes with relationships leveraging this, right? There are people who probably never heard their names, who took a stance at USC. You don't know them, right? This is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala working in the back, that if you know, you know. If you don't know, you don't know. So there's always more going on. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or the Prophet is saying, don't be fooled by the numbers. There's always more going on. Don't be disheartened when people abandon ship, when people abandon you. It's not about who's there. It's about, is what you're doing the right thing to do? Now, of course, I don't want us to become reckless. This doesn't mean one person goes in and thinks they're going to change the world. It's not the way it works, right? You need resources, you need relationships, you need strategy, you need all of this. The companions built a trench, built a huge trench, right? The idea is, when you have taken the means, right, stand your ground, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will have your back. He will send people you didn't know about. People are working in the background who you don't know about. He will send certain elements like the wind, like fear, etc., to assist the believers and assist the cause bid'illah ta'ala. And this group of people will always be on the truth. They will be victorious one way or another, sooner or later, maybe in their lifetime, maybe not in their lifetime. Right? Take Umar Mukhtar. I don't know if you're familiar with this man. Umar Mukhtar was the leader of the resistance in Algeria. What the France did to Algeria is incredibly brutal. Incredibly brutal. And he was the leader of the resistance. And they caught him and they executed him. But is France there? Right? Victory was attained, or at least progress was made. It just didn't happen to be in his lifetime. Right? So, always remember this. Now, it seems like this hadith has 3 parts, and they're kind of not connected. The Prophet starts and says, if Allah wants good for you, He'll help you understand the religion. And His role is to distribute things that are from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And there will always be a group from this ummah that's on the truth. Like, how are all these connected? Well, perhaps one way it's connected is that if Allah wants good for a person or a people, He will help them understand the religion. And this group of people who are on the truth will always be the group that understands the religion. In other words, scholarship. Scholarship is incredibly important. Scholars play an incredibly important role in this ummah. And they are more often than not every scholar, by the way, not every scholar. But when you see that scholarship is supporting a cause, then inshallah that is a good sign. Right? Alhamdulillah, yesterday at UCI, pretty much all the OC imams were there. All of them. With the exception maybe one. They're there, supporting these heroes. Right? So inshallah, that's a good sign, bi'idhnillah ta'ala. Bab al-Fahmi fil ilm, a chapter understanding knowledge. عن ابن عمر رضي الله تعالى عنهما قال كنا عند رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم فأتي بجمار فقال إن من الشجر شجرة وذكر الحديث. We already went over this hadith. It's about the tree. What tree represents or symbolizes the believer, the palm tree. So I need to go over that again. عن عبد الله بن مسعود رضي الله تعالى عنه قال كان النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم لا حسد إلا في اثنتين رجل آتاه الله مالا فسلط على هلكته في الحق وَرَجُلٌ آتَاهُ اللَّهُ الْحِكْمَةَ فَهُوَ يَقْضِي بِهَا وَيُعَلِّمُهَا. Ibn Mas'ud radiallahu ta'ala anhu says that the Prophet ﷺ said, we're not allowed to envy someone except for one of two things. When you envy someone, you envy them for a reason. They have a car, they have a home, they have a job, they have a salary, they have money, whatever it is. The Prophet says envy is not a feeling that the believers entertain, except in two things. One, envying someone who Allah has given money to, and they use that money to support the truth. Right? They use that money to support the truth. And the second one is someone who Allah has given wisdom to, and they use that wisdom to judge affairs and to teach people. All right? So these are two things that it's okay to be envious of. But let's break this down a little bit. One, what is hasad really? Hasad, the haram version, what we call envy, is when a person is upset that someone else has something and wishes that they lose it. Right? That's hasad. That's haram, that a person gets sinned for. I'll repeat it. Hasad, envy, is when a person has something that you wish they lose, even if you don't end up with it. Because sometimes you might say, man, I'm so envious that person has that, I wish I have that too. Oh, they have that car, I wish I had that car. But it's not in your heart that you wish they lose it. I just wish I had something like it. This isn't sinful envy. It's not beneficial, but it's not sinful. It becomes a sin when you wish that other person loses it. Why is it a sin? Why is it toxic to Iman? And this is one of the 5 major spiritual diseases. 1, arrogance. 2, ostentation, showing off. 3, hasad, envy. 4, self-deception, ghurur. And 5, ujub, self-righteousness. These are the 5 major spiritual diseases right here. Right? Hasad is one of them. Why? Because at the core of envy is a dispute of Allah's qadar. It's a dispute of Allah's qadar. It's discontentment with Allah's qadar. It's as though the person's saying, without using words, that Allah did it wrong. I should have that, they don't deserve it. And this is why it's a major spiritual disease. I mean, how can someone develop a relationship with Allah if their heart is full of hasad? They can't. They will never be able to. Right? And Iblis was full of hasad. And look what that did to him. Completely destroyed any iman he even had, if he had any. Right? So this is what hasad is. Now, when you look at these two things that I mentioned, number one, it's not at the level of sinful hasad, because they wish they had what the person had, but they're not wishing that that person loses it. See what I mean? They see someone with a lot of money using that money in ways that pleases Allah. They see someone with wisdom, and they're using that wisdom for good. It's not that they want that person to lose it, or that they are saying, oh Allah, why did you give it to that person? You know, they're not deserving of it. Rather, they're simply saying, and I wish I had that, right? I wish Allah would give me that. And number 2, the other element here that makes this type of hasad fruitful is what they would do with it. The thing that they're really envying is not what they have, but the fact that they're using it for the sake of Allah. What they are seeing in their mind is somebody is doing something pleasing to Allah, and they wish they could do the same. That's what's going on here. It's like, man, I want to please Allah, like the way that person's pleasing Allah. And so I wish I had what that person had. So this here, it's not a question of the material. It's not that the person says, man, why didn't Allah give me this? In their mind, what's going on? I wish I could do these things for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It just happens to be that money or knowledge is the means to doing that. So when you see somebody with a lot of money and they're using that money for the sake of Allah, or somebody who has wisdom and knowledge and they're using it to spread or to do it for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to use it for the sake of Allah, then you're allowed to say to yourself, and I wish I could do the same. I wish I could participate in those practices that are pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? Now, the title of this chapter is Understanding in Knowledge, right? Understanding knowledge. Or to put it differently, knowledge is understanding. That's what real knowledge is. Knowledge isn't the gathering of information. It is your ability to understand the information. Why? Because when you understand the information, you're able to use it. You know where to use it, when to use it, how to use it, what it's meant to be used for. But people who just gather a bunch of information and they don't know how to use, they don't really understand it, they'll actually end up doing more harm than good, because they'll misuse it. They'll use it in the wrong places. They won't know how to transmit the true meaning behind this knowledge to other people, and so it becomes confusing. All right, and we get this meaning from this hadith because the Prophet says, وَرَجُلٌ آتَاهُ اللَّهُ الْحِكْمَةِ. The Prophet didn't say وَرَجُلٌ آتَاهُ اللَّهُ الْعِلْمَ. The Prophet didn't say a person who Allah has given knowledge to. Rather, the Prophet said a person Allah has given wisdom to. And what is wisdom? The ability to apply what you know in a way that's productive. That's wisdom right there. Right? And so even in the Quran, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says something similar, Allah says, يُؤْتِ الْحِكْمَةَ مَنْ يَشَاءُ وَمَنْ يُؤْتَ الْحِكْمَةَ فَقَدْ أُوتِيَ خَيْرًا كَثِيرًا. Allah gives wisdom to whom He wills. Imam Malik says, what's meant by this is knowledge. Knowledge of the halal and the haram, meaning Allah gives them understanding of this information. Right? Okay, the next hadith or next chapter, Bab قول النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم اللهم علمه الكتاب. عن ابن عباس رضي الله تعالى عنهما قال ضمني رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم وقال اللهم علمه الكتاب. Ibn Abbas رضي الله تعالى عنهما said that, and Ibn Abbas he's pretty young here, he's in his teens. He said that the Prophet ﷺ hugged me and he said, "Oh Allah, teach him knowledge of the Quran. Give him knowledge of the Quran." And another narration, Allahumma faqihhu fi din wa alimhu ta'wil. Oh Allah, give him understanding of the religion and give him and teach him tafsir, like understand, like how to explain the Quran. And that's exactly what Ibn Abbas was. He is a senior scholar from the companions, and his scholarship was in fiqh and tafsir, right? But more so tafsir. So when you look at the companions, there are three primary fuqaha. All the fiqh that we know today, all the fiqh that we have, from Imam Abu Hanifa, Malik, Shafi'i, and Ahmad, all of it go back to three companions: Abdullah ibn Umar, Abdullah ibn Abbas, and Abdullah ibn Mas'ud. These three companions, the three Abdullahs. Abu Hanifa's entire school goes back to Abdullah ibn Mas'ud. He took his knowledge from the students of Ibn Mas'ud. And now you have Abu Hanifa's school. Imam Malik took his knowledge from the students of Ibn Abbas and Ibn Umar. See, Ibn Mas'ud went to Iraq. That's where he spent the second half of his life, that's where he died. Abu Hanifa was where? In Iraq. So he met the students of Ibn Mas'ud. Whereas Ibn Abbas and Ibn Umar, they lived in Medina. They stayed in Medina, they died in Medina. Right? Imam Malik was where? Medina. So Ibn Abbas was a senior scholar of fiqh, but he was the most knowledgeable in the Quran. Right? He is the most knowledgeable companion person after the Prophet ﷺ when it comes to the Quran. And he's called the ink of scholars. It's just a phrase. Right? And that comes from where? The dua of the Prophet. Right? Allahumma faqihhu fi din wa alimhu ta'wil. And what this is teaching us is part of pursuing knowledge is making dua. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala teaches you knowledge. Right? As the previous hadith said, the Prophet said, I distribute knowledge to you. Allah is the one who gives. Well, knowledge is rizq from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So ask it from the source. Ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give you knowledge. Now, of course, you have to study, right? And of course, the harder you study, the more knowledge you're going to get. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He plays a role in helping you preserve that knowledge, giving you the strength, the energy to continue to pursue the knowledge, making shortcuts for you, by the way. You know, the Islamic library isn't exactly small, and you get lost, and you don't have the time to read through everything. You're only going to read through a very small percentage. So you need to be wise. You need to know what books to go to. There are certain books that will summarize an entire field for you and give you more knowledge than 100 books will give you, because it's so well written, it's so well researched, right? So, you know, that's another way Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala helps you gain knowledge, by giving you that tawfiq, preserving it in your mind, and also helping you see things in the verses in hadith that are relevant to your time. So to conclude for today, when we say understanding knowledge, right, because that was pretty much the crux of these ahadith today. Understanding knowledge is the ability to see how what you are learning is relevant to your time today. If you don't know how the Quran is speaking to what you are going through, then what's the point? If I read a hadith, yassiru wa la tu'assiru, bashiru wa la tunaffiru, make things easy, don't make things complicated, don't be difficult. Be somebody whose words are uplifting, don't be somebody who's demoralizing. If you don't understand how that's relevant to your life, right, then what's the point of even knowing it? It's like these tabloids that you see in the cashiers, right? The royal family, what's going on? And you know something that they found that comes from 5,000 years ago. Oh, the skeleton of a snake. If that has no relevance to my life today, what's the point? Why should I even waste my time? And this is the meaning of the dua. أعوذ بك من علم لا ينفع. I seek refuge from you. I mean, we seek refuge from Allah. Like, this is something harmful. I got to stay away from this. We seek refuge in Allah from knowledge that's not beneficial. The scholar said knowledge that is irrelevant to your day-to-day lives. It means nothing to you. Right? Wallahu ta'ala alam. We'll go ahead and stop there. At hadith number 68. وصلى الله على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين.